When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Goblin YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be doing Jon VII, A Game of Thrones. By far, if not Jon's best chapter in this book, one of his best chapters in this book. We're finally getting into like the meat of Jon's, I guess, POV in this book. A lot of the POV in this book spends a lot of time on building up the character of Jon, building up the Night's Watch, what it is, what it stands for, and kind of the allure, I guess, of the others, and right, building up that mystery. And so this is kind of a culmination of all those things, where it's a lot of big character moments for Jon, but it's also a lot of big plot moments when it comes to the others' plot. So a really impactful and important chapter, and excited to get into it. But let's start on page 552. Again, this one basically picks up exactly where the last chapter ended on for Jon, but we see that Sir Riker notes the dead men they found in the last chapter are Othar and Jaffer Flowers, as he turns their bodies over to reveal their dead skin and deep blue eyes, both of which were Benjen's men. Again, I do have an image up on the screen, and it's supposed to be Othar from the show. Didn't do such a great job on the blue eyes, but you know, there you go. But this is kind of a big reveal here for Jon, because again, this is part of Benjen's party. This would imply that they were attacked or whatnot. Benjen's party and him himself could be dead, and that's a really big reveal, because up to now we've had no real evidence as to what actually happened with Benjen's party. We just know they're missing. But another question is brought up is, why are they so close to the wall? It would seem very unlikely that Benjen would get attacked this close to the wall, so it makes you question, and something that our characters are going to have to figure out as this chapter goes on. But Jon thinks numbly that these were Benjen's men, and how green he was, pleading to go north of the wall. If he had gone, it might be him lying here. Again, one thing that I think is very important to understand in this chapter is Jon, yes, has matured quite a lot from coming to the wall, but he's still not a man, right? He still thinks, like, Jon himself believes that he's older than he is, even now. Even after learning all these lessons, he's still just a kid, right? He's still young, and he has much to learn, but you know, it is part of that growing process of understanding, okay, yeah, I really wanted to go on this trip, and it didn't go well. Jon notes that one of Jaffer's hands was being looked at in vinegar by Aemon, but his other hand was black. Again, very questionable. Why is his hand black? Mormont is so stunned he gets off his horse to take a closer look, leaving Jon with the horse. We note two things that are important. It is much warmer than usual, and that's going to be a common thing that Jon is going to note in this chapter, is that it seems extremely warm all the way up until the end of this chapter. Why is that, right? And I even noted, like, is this supposed to be this idea of, like, the corpses are being unfrozen, like they've been preserved by the others, but now they're being unfrozen to attack? I've kind of maybe made that parallel. But also, there's something else we'll talk about when we get further into this chapter that I think is even more revealing. But at this, the two horses seem to be extremely frightened of the corpse, which is also very unusual. Think about it. Like, corpses is not anything unusual to a horse, right? Think about war, right? You're around dead people all the time. That just seems very off, and is something that Jon will pick up in this chapter as well. But that gets us into page 553. So, continuing in, he notes that the horses did not like this place, and neither did Jon, but Ghost had led them here. Again, piggybacking off the last chapter, Ghost finds the hand, and so Ghost was the only one that could bring them to where the bodies were. But even when the hounds had tried to smell the hand, to basically find the scent where they were frightened, but not Ghost. And that was something that, again, doesn't seem quite right. But something else that I find very suspicious is, yes, we know that Ghost is very smart and those things, but it does seem quite interesting that Ghost is leading them to these bodies, which are going to be extremely impactful to the story. Again, I would question that there's a lot of other factors going on here that I think we could find out in Winds of Winter, that Bloodraven could have been manipulating some of these events, because this just seems very suspicious. But Jon notes it is only woods and dead men. He had seen them before, but Jon is reminded of the dream that he had last night. And this is also very weird that this happens at this moment. Again, it almost feels like there's some intervention from some other force that's giving Jon a warning. Because we see that he has this dream of the crypts we've talked about in past chapters, so I won't go over it too much, but every time it seems like Jon has this dream, he goes down in the crypts and he goes down to see basically the old kings and where his eventual death site would be, or I guess his siblings and Ned's. But this time he saw the old kings raising from their graves. Whoa, that's way different, right? That's to imply that the dead are rising, right? There's these spirits that could be under Winterfell. That's all very interesting. And when you think about it in this chapter, when we are going to see the dead walking, that's a very heavy implication as to what is going to happen. But I also want to step further, because yes, you can imply the others, and I think that's more what George is looking for here, but could you also suggest that because he's getting further into the crypts, it appears to be the doom or death drawing closer for someone like Ned and even the Stark family, right? This is going to be the event that really separates their family. A lot of them are going to be killed. So again, I think there's a lot of implications for this dream from Jon. Jon then notes Samwell, who's huddled by a tree, avoiding the dead men. Jon tells him he must look. Again, he has been sent here basically as Aemon's eyes. And what good are they if he doesn't use them, is what Jon tells him. But Sam notes that he is a coward, but Jon tells him the first look is always the hardest. And Sam builds enough courage to look, and Jon makes sure that he cannot look away, holding him in place. And that gets us into page 554. But at this, Mormont asks Riker where the other men are that went with Benjen. Again, very suspicious that only 2 of the party are here. Riker has no idea, and Mormont again is not pleased by that, asking, is this what the Night's Watch has come to? Men are killed within sight of the wall, but no one saw it? No one says anything about it. Mormont also notes that Othor had a hunting horn and thinks that he must have blown it. How did no one hear it? Again, these are all suspicious factors, right? Because the wall, we know it is like manned, right? People are always on the watch, usually. It's just they don't have the manpower to have every, mile of the wall watched. And so something like this happening, I don't think is like anything out of the ordinary, just because they don't have the manpower. But I think more interesting fact is Othor having a horn. And you would think in desperation, like we see like in something like Lord of the Rings, Boromir blows his horn. You would think Othor would do that. But he doesn't, which makes this, again, even more suspicious. But Riker denies anyone hearing this horn. They would have heard it. But he says he has less men than he would like, and they have not been going out far after Benjen's disappearance on his command. Again, makes sense. Your best ranger goes missing with a group of men that were some of the best they had. You're not going to start wandering that much further out. Yes, you still are going to range, but you also don't have many men. So, again, I think this is all logical from Riker. Mormont then asks how they died, and Riker suggests with an axe, as their throats are brutally cut and have other wounds as well. That gets us into page 555. Jon once again notes that their eyes were still open with deep sapphire eyes. Again, it's really painting that these guys have very, bright blue eyes, which is questionable thinking about what we'll talk about later. Mormont questions this, that the wildlings wouldn't attack so close to the wall. It didn't really seem right. But Riker thinks it was Mance Rayder's work. Who else? And Jon at this moment is very clever and smart. Everyone knows what it could have been, but no one is willing to say it, right? You would rather deny a hard truth than face it. A very famous line that we hear in this story is exemplified here, right? Because Jon knew who else. It could be the others, but they all wanted to believe that they were extinct, but they all knew the truth, but denied it. Mormont notes if they were wildlings, Benjen would have come back for more men and took their heads. Unless, as Riker notes, he is dead. Which I think is a fair point. Like, they were not a large party, right? If they got ambushed by, like, say, 30, 40 wildlings, and they would want to do so, right? Benjen was a very prominent member. You would either want to take capture of him or kill him. He's not someone you would take lightly. Very similar to like the half-hand, Corran half-hand. So again, I think this is a weird point by Mormont. It's a lot of faith in Benjen to escape, say, an ambush or something like that, but, you know. But the words hurt Jon as he still clung to hope, but it had been so long. As Riker notes, it had been almost half a year, and they could have been attacked at any point, right? And so again, I think this is that point for Jon where it's like, you almost can't plausibly deny that Benjen's dead at this point. You've seen part of his party has died and has either been placed at the wall or they were killed outside of the wall. Our character's not sure at this point, but it does become much harder to deny at this point. Riker believes that these two were probably the last on their way back, as they could not have been dead more than a day. And that's an interesting idea, because I think of all of the ideas, if I'm going to say it wasn't the others that did it, I think it's the most logical, given that there's no blood on the ground, none of that. It would seem that these were like the last two coming back and they were placed here. That seems like a logical outcome if you're someone like Riker, if you're trying to deny it was the others. But at this, Sam pipes up saying no. Jon was shocked to hear him. Again, Sam is someone that's very nervous. He's scared of a lot of the higher officers. And Sam just notes that's not true. Riker tries to shut him down, but Jon says to let him speak. And Mormont agrees and beckons him to come closer. And that gets us into page 556. Sam notes it could not have been a day ago. He notes the blood. Mormont is impatient, asking what about it. And then Chet, always being, the jealous and salty type, makes a joke that he soils his small clothing just looking at it. But Sam notes that Jon's wolf had bit the hand off, but there was no blood or anything like that. As he references when his father would dress a deer, it is all wrong. The veins would be different, but here they were black. Riker says if they were dead longer, there would be a horrific smell. Daiwin the Forester even notes he has the truth of it, but Sam disagrees. They are not rotting. Nothing will go near them. No worms or maggots, only ghosts, and Jon notes he is different. Even the horses and dogs are frightened by the bodies. Mormont frowns at this and commands Chet to bring the dogs, who will refuse to go anywhere near the corpses. Again, Sam has the right of this. There's just too much suspicious activity going on here, right? Like, the blood isn't right. Their deaths just aren't unnatural. For the animals, right, just will not go near them. There's something wrong here. And Sam continues stating that, right? There's no blood on the ground, which Daiwin thinks someone could have brought them here as a message, but then he notes that he did not remember Othar having blue eyes. But at this, Riker also has a change of heart, as he knows that Jaffer did not have blue eyes either. So again, we're left with another suspicious moment where we kind of come to the idea that these are the others, right? Like these are some Wights, like they have to be. But some in the party say to burn them, a wise choice, but Mormont says no, saying that he wants Aemon to inspect them first, and they are to be brought to the wall. This command did not go lightly. Again, you have a bunch of animals that will not interact with these bodies at all. It's also just really creepy bringing back some dead bodies that you know are not right. It's a tough command. So they were forced to basically drag them back, and it would be well past midday by the time they would get back. Mormont notes that he wants every part of this force checked for any others of Benjen's party or anyone responsible to be brought back here alive if possible. And that gets us into page 558. Sir Jeremy says it will be done, and they rode back in silence with Mormont brooding the entire way. Jon again notices the heat, and now the wall was weeping heavily and almost seemed smaller. The old men were calling it the spirit summer, that the season was giving up its ghosts, and soon the winter would come. Something else I want to note here is, like, it almost kind of feels like the way the world has been, right? The others have been gone for so long that this spirit summer is a lot of ways a reflection of that hiding of the others, in my opinion, where this spirit summer is false, right? It's not a true summer. It's just something that comes back right before the dark times come in the winter. And so that's kind of how I look at this period in between, the first time they came and now this time, right? They've been in hiding, and this is where they're finally going to make their presence known a bit more. Jon notes that it has been summer for 10 years. He was only a babe then. He notes a ghost going into the forest, and Jon felt naked without him. He was a bit on edge at any shadow or movement, remembering old Nan's tales about the others, how they hated fire, iron, and the sun. Again, very important for later in this chapter. But how they came south, and none could withstand them. How they fed their dead servants with the flesh of human children. She also stated that they hated any with warm blood in their veins. Again, a lot of things are thrown around here that it's like, how would old Nan know these things? But even more so, it does paint them as just bad guys. They just hate humans. They hate the living. But why? Maybe there is no answer, right? Maybe there is no why. Maybe they are just this force of evil. But Jon was relieved when he caught the first sight of the wall, but at this, Mormont calls Sam to him and says that he may be fat, but he is not stupid, and that he did well back there, and Jon did as well, as Sam turns a shade of red. Again, Sam is someone that is not appreciated very often, especially from his superiors, and so I think this is a really big moment for Sam. And it's going to be a reason I think that he's going to find some newfound courage or strength, especially later on in this chapter specifically. There's a moment that I really want to talk about. But getting into page 559, they emerge from the trees, and Ghost meets them with blood on his mouth from a fresh kill. A horn announces their arrival, and Jon notes one horn for rangers returning, and Jon thinks he was a ranger for one day. They cannot take that away from him. But again, this just really shows that Jon hasn't learned the lesson, right? Jon talked about earlier in this chapter that, he was lucky that he didn't go on this adventure with Benjen, or maybe he would be dead. But then here he is talking about how, oh, well, I got to be a ranger for one day, because he longs to be a ranger. But this should show you being a ranger is not an easy life. It's very difficult. It's by far the most dangerous. He hasn't really learned that lesson, in my opinion. But upon getting through the gate, Bowen Marsh tells Mormont there has been a letter and to come immediately. Mormont asks what it is, and suspiciously, Marsh gives Jon a weird look and says Aemon has the letter and is waiting in his solar. Again, this is going to be the first of many foreshadows as to what is to come. Again, us, the audience, we maybe don't know what this letter is because it's one of those things where, it could be a number of things, but again, Ned has just been imprisoned. He has been denounced as a traitor, all these things. So us, the audience, is not exactly a surprise as to what happens, but for Jon, again, he doesn't know that, right? He's not on Twitter, or he's not on Instagram. He doesn't check that and go, oh yeah, my father's now a traitor. Mormont agrees to go, but tells Jon to have them store the bodies in the storeroom and to take care of his horse. As they lead their horses to the stables, he noted that Thorne's eyes were following him. He was drilling the recruits, but he stopped to smile at him, as well as Donnell Noy tells Jon, the gods be with you, Snow. Both of these interactions with Noy and Thorne are obvious signs that something is not right for Jon. And he instantly realizes that something is wrong, right? Like, this is not normal behavior. But after this, he takes care of the horses, he finds Pip and Gren and asks what happened. Pip tells him that Robert has died. And that gets us into page 560. Now, this is all Jon is going to find out from Pip, but Jon has to realize there's something else going on, right? People would not be reacting this way to him if it was just because Robert died. But at this, Jon thinks that Robert did look old, but he did not seem like he was in the shape to die, right? He seemed like he had some sort of spirit to him, or he wasn't declining exactly yet. But again, it shows how observant Jon is. Jon asks how they know, but a guard overheard Clytus telling Aemon the message. Pip offers his sympathies as Robert was a close friend of Ned's. Jon agrees, but he is not thinking of that as he wonders if Joffrey will keep Ned as hand. He thinks not, which would mean him and at least Arya would probably come back north. And again, very happy thought from Jon, right? Getting to see your father again, getting to see his sister. Again, for me, it is half-sister, but here let's just go with sister. They have a very close relationship. And it's something that I think Jon is still holding on to his youth a bit. He thinks that he may be able to see them and finally get the truth of who his mother was, as he is a man now. Again, Jon is not exactly learning that lesson that he's still just a kid, right? He hasn't experienced much in this world. He's still very young, but he is a man of the Night's Watch now. Pip asks if the dead men were Benjen's party, and Jon confirms, saying the bodies were quite weird and to ask Sam about it. But at this, Jon leaves to see if Mormont has need of him. Upon getting there, the guard tells him Mormont was requesting him, and this right away is a kind of a warning sign for Jon. Jon wants to believe that it's nothing, right? It's going to be something, very mundane, stuff that he always wants, like wine or food or something. But upon entering, he has Jon pour a cup of wine for him and himself, as Mormont has a look of pity in his eyes. Again, Jon knows something's wrong. Jon takes his time pouring, as when he is done, he knows he will have to face whatever was in that letter. And this is when the big reveal is going to happen, right? This is a big moment for Jon's character and the way he reacts to all of this going down. When he was done pouring, Mormont tells him to sit and drink. Jon stays standing up and asks if it is about his father, to which Mormont agrees and says it is grievous news. He had never thought to see another king, as Robert was half his age and strong as a bull. This also does paint again that there was some suspicious things going on, but he notes he loved to hunt, and the things we love kill us in the end. And this is a fantastic line. It's one of the best lines of the entire story because it just resonates so much with the story. Think about Viserys when he dies in Dany's 5th chapter. The thing that kills him is his lust for power and to be a king and to be acknowledged, to have respect. Those things are what kills him. Robert's is very much the same when it comes to wine and hunting. So it's a line that I just think has so many ripples all throughout the story that I really love. It's just one of those really underrated lines of the entire story. But he talks about how Jorah would never have gone into selling poachers if it was not for his vain wife, who basically bankrupted him. Again, great comparison that ties into Dany's storyline really well, and it gives you a bit more of that understanding of how Jeor Mormont views his son. Jon did not understand what he was saying, but Mormont commands him to sit and drink. Mormont tells him that Ned allegedly planned to deny Joffrey the throne with Robert's brothers and has been imprisoned. Jon already knows Ned too well, and this doesn't seem right. He says that that could not be true. He would never betray the king. And Mormont says that it is not for him or Jon to say. Again, they take no part in these wars or these things going on in the kingdoms. It's not for them to say. But Jon won't accept that, saying it is a lie. Jon thinks, how could they even believe this? Ned would never dishonor himself, but then he thinks about it. He thinks about his own birth and his mother. Again, this is such great writing in this moment because it makes Jon question it, right? Like his own birth was quite dishonorable. Bastards are bad. People do not like bastards. Think about the way Jon has been treated at the Wall. And so that makes him question it, which I love. It's a great tie-in to Jon's backstory and connecting that character to Ned's character during this point. Jon asks what is to be done with him, and Mormont says the letter does not say, but he plans to respond asking for Ned to be sent here. They have grievous need of his skills, as he is a great lord. Jon thinks on this, and that has happened in the past, right? Great lords are sent to the Wall for their crimes, Bloodraven being one of those. But he is strangely uncomfortable with this, which I don't blame Jon, right? Like, yes, it means life for his father. That's great. But you would have your father looking over your shoulder the rest of your life, or at least for a good portion of your life until he died. It's one of those things where I think if you want to relate it to more of a modern thing, let's say you're going away to school, right? College, whatever, university, and you just want some freedom. You want to experience living on your own for a bit. It would feel really weird than if you instantly then had to move back with your dad, or you had to live with your parents forever, right? You never had any semblance of freedom or self-responsibility, being able to live on your own. How would you feel about that? Because that's kind of the position Jon's put in right here. So I do think that is quite a weird position to have to be in. But even think about it from this point of view, like you're constantly going to have to be serving your father, right? Whether that's in this regard or that regard. It's a weird position because also then you think about Jon's position. He is basically being this steward for Mormont to learn how to lead, right? To basically be Mormont's successor in the future. If Ned comes along, that's not the case anymore. So it kind of feels like a waste of time. Jon notes it would seem unfair for Ned to be stripped of everything, but it meant life. He asks if Joffrey would even allow it, remembering his time in Winterfell. And we have probably one of the most ironic lines in the entire series as Mormont shrugs, saying he is a boy king and will listen to his mother. Oh, the irony in that statement, the foreshadowing of that statement. Mormont also notes it is a shame his lady mother took Tyrion captive as he knew their need. This angers Jon considerably, as he says she is not his mother and thinks that if Ned dies, it is almost as much to blame her as it is to blame Cersei, which is actually quite insightful from Jon. Even though it is based in emotion and anger, Catelyn is the reason Ned is kind of in such a shitty position. Now, you know, I wouldn't go as far as saying Catelyn is as big as the blame as Cersei. I don't think that's true, but it is a part of it. So I think that's an interesting moment, but also I do think, right, like Mormont has a point, right? If Tyrion was in King's Landing, I think it's very likely that Ned would have ended up coming to the wall instead of what actually ended up happening. So I think that's a nice interaction that's just very interesting to look at on a reread. Jon asks about his sisters, and Mormont notes nothing was said of them, but he will ask. He continues saying this could not have happened at a worse time, that the kingdoms need strength against this growing darkness. He also hopes that Jon is not planning to do anything stupid. And Jon feels helpless. What is he to do? This is his father and his sisters. Again, Jon has not been at the Watch long enough to be going through this big of a crisis, right? Only half a year. He's been here a little over half a year, and already, right, his father is being called a traitor. His sisters, who knows what happened. It's a lot for Jon to process and to handle. But he says nothing, and Mormont reminds him his duties are here now. Mormont tells him he is free to go, and he will help him write this letter the next day, which is actually a really nice gesture from Mormont, right? Jon is basically helpless in the situation. He can't do anything about it, but Mormont is willing to offer him any solace that he can. It shows that Mormont does have a care for Jon, and I really like that moment. Jon did not remember leaving, but the guard tells him to be strong and that the gods are cruel. But at this moment, it all slides together. He realizes that everyone already knows. He fires back saying Ned is not a traitor. Again, it's one of these moments where I think you can relate to in real life. You know, go back to Jon's age, right? You're still in school or whatnot. And you realize that this rumor has been going about, you know, you or your friend, and you're the last person to know. That's a really disheartening feeling because it makes Jon feel ever the more isolated and alone. Jon notes that the cold has returned once again. And this, again, I think is to signify winter coming. That winter is coming for Ned and Jon's tough decision, as well as the others rising as well. Again, a lot of things are correlating, right? Jon in this book is going to have to make a decision. Is he going to desert the wall and try to help his family, or is he going to stay loyal to the Watch? But also Ned's death, and also the others rising in this chapter. He notes how Ghost made him feel safer, but that his sisters had nothing, right? Lady was dead and Nymeria had been lost. What were his sisters going to do? Again, it's that hopeless feeling that Jon has. But as he goes to dinner, he notes once again that everyone knows as Hobb gives him extra food. He notices the eyes following him and his friends attempting to cheer him up, saying that we can light a candle for Ned, and they know it's a lie. As well as Sam, which I think this line from Sam just shows where their friendship has gone and how much Sam is starting to grow, because Sam states that we can pray at the weirwoods, which is incredibly caring of Sam. Sam is someone that fears north of the wall. He fears the weirwood trees, their eyes looking at him, but he's willing to do that for Jon in his time of need. I think that's a big moment for their relationship, and it's a really heartfelt moment. But Jon did not doubt Sam and notes they are all his brothers as much as Robb, Bran, and Rickon, but Jon then notes that Thorne is at a table laughing with other men, noting how Jon is not only a bastard, but a traitor's bastard. And this is enough for Jon. Jon doesn't think, he acts. He vaults from the table, knife in hand. Pip tries to grab hold of him, but he yanks free, sprinting towards Thorne. He splashes his bowl of stew and goes to slash him, but Sam is there to block him. Again, what else can you say about this chapter? It's so well done with how it foreshadows events, how it takes Jon's character and flips it on a head, testing his vows, his loyalties. And this is a moment where Jon is just caught off guard. He doesn't think, he just acts. He's had enough of everyone, the way he's been treated, and this is just one of those moments that he lashes out on his big rival of Alliser Thorne. That gets us into page 564. His friends were on him in an instant, and he was escorted back to his sleeping cell, where Mormont came to his room and expressed his disappointment, saying he had high hopes for him and had told him not to do anything stupid. Again, almost killing a high officer is basically treason. It's a punishable by death offense. You're not to bear arms against your brother or kill your brother. And so, yeah, there's a lot that has to be decided about Jon's fate. They had taken his knife and sword, but they did allow him Ghost. He was to await his fate when the high officers met to decide what was to be done with him. At this, he notes how much darker and colder the world felt. He knew he would not sleep tonight. Again, the impending doom and cold rises. But he must have slept, because he woke with his legs cramping, but Ghost was on his hind legs scratching at the door. Something seemed wrong. He asks Ghost what is wrong, but he begins to snarl and bares his teeth. Jon tries to calm him down, but he's almost scared of Ghost, because Ghost just seems on edge. He asks Ghost if there's someone out there, and he moves to the door, assuming Ghost smells the guard outside. All the while, Jon continues to question when it had gotten so cold. It seems unnatural. The whole day it had been extremely warm, and now it's as cold as ever. Something is not adding up, and that gets us into the next page, 565. Jon notes the guard lying on the floor with his head completely twisted around, facing the wrong direction. Again, it's one of those moments where it's like, this is how your head's normally supposed to be. It was come the complete opposite direction. Kind of something that you do not want to see opening your door. But Ghost does not mind. He slides past him, pointing to the Lord Commander's chambers, as Jon hears the sound of boot on stone coming from the chambers. Jon thought it was a dream, but this was no dream. He took the guard's sword and with new confidence starts towards Mormont's chambers, to find the door wide open and even darker because the drapes were pulled over the windows. He asked who was there, and then he finally saw it, a black outline in black clothing, but with bright blue eyes. Again, this is a scary thought, right? Because what have we been told the entire chapter of having big, blue, bright eyes? And you've got to feel that shock for Jon. But Ghost has none of that. He instantly is attacking it. But Jon felt near blind and takes the drapes down to get some sort of light, letting the moonlight in. He sees the black hands and the white fur on his wolf's throat. Again, we see that this is already quite unnatural because Ghost, for I think really any normal person, would easily be able to kill them, but Ghost is struggling with this creature or thing or whatever Jon thinks it is at this point. Jon had no time to think and is on him as he slashes with all his might and cuts the thing's arm/hand clean off. But the noise and smell was weird and not normal at all. Ghost spurts away, but then the figure reveals his hooded face in the light. Jon, without hesitation, slashes him in the face, cutting off half his nose and cutting him from cheek to cheek. A nice little nod to Tyrion getting half of his nose cut off in the next book, I will say. Nice little note there, but this isn't right. How is this other thing taking a sword shot to the face and his arm being cut off and is fine? Jon realizes with horror that it is Othar. He thinks of how he saw him dead. This cannot be possible. Again, this is just unnatural. You're seeing a dead body reanimated and attacking. Very weird. But the even more interesting part is, why is it targeting Mormont? What is the rationale there? The others have to then know that there's some importance in understanding how the Night's Watch works to try and sow discord and taking out the Lord Commander. There's a lot to be had here. Why do they do that? But at this, the hand that had been cut off begins to crawl up his leg, but Jon flings it off with his sword. It begins to come at him again, but Ghost grabs it with his mouth. Jon returns to the fight at hand. He tells Othar to stay back, but he keeps approaching. Jon hits him in the neck, but Othar goes right through it, knocking him to the ground. Jon lost his breath as Othar was on top of him. Jon tried everything. He tried kicking at his legs and looking for his sword, but Othar's weight was too much. He tried to scream for help, but Othar forced his fingers deep into his mouth, choking him. This is a horrifying feeling. Like, can you imagine you just have this undead zombie? It weighs more than you. It's more powerful than you, and you're helpless to do anything. It can't feel. From what we can tell, it can't feel being kicked in the leg. It can't feel kicking him in the thigh or kicking him in the genitals or whatever. It doesn't feel that. It just wants to kill you. And even when you go to scream for help, it sticks its nasty black fingers in your mouth and begins to choke you. It is a horrifying shot and picture that George paints. But finally, the weight was relieved from him as Ghost begins the fight once again. And that gets us into page 567, the last page of the chapter. Ghost tears at Othar's gut, but Jon was barely conscious, looking for his sword, when Mormont appeared. The dead hand or arm again started to thrash towards him. He wanted to shout to Mormont, but he couldn't. Again, when you think about being choked so badly by this creature or this other, you're probably not going to be able to speak for a second. Especially also just the shock of what's going on. Jon snatched the lamp from Mormont's fingers, and a very curious line is spoken by Mormont's raven, as it says, "Burn." Again, it seems like a lot of manipulations going on here. A lot of things are happening here that just don't make sense unless some other force is helping. Which seems, again, a little suspicious. Jon, with both hands, then flings the lamp into the drapes he had pulled down, calls Ghost to him and through the drapes that were on fire at the Wight. And Jon prayed it would kill the thing. Also to note, George specifically notes the wound the Wight has dark snakes coming out of it. Very curious, something that the show did not do at all, but very interesting note. Dark snakes. But this is the end of the chapter. We're not given any resolution as to whether this actually did kill Othar or what. We have to wait till the next chapter. But one of the top 10 chapters, I think, so far of our reread. It's a fantastic one. It's one that I think Jon sorely needed because Jon's had a lot of chapters in this book that I think are like middle of the road. You know, they're good, but they're not anything crazy. They're not anything, terribly special. This is that special chapter for Jon. I think he's going to have one more in this book at least. And, yeah, let me know what you guys thought about this chapter. I hope you guys all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.